According to a new report by the Chinese Ministry of the Environment, 1/5 of all farmland in China is contaminated. The study shows that most of this contamination, which makes growing food difficult and in some areas outright impossible, is primarily due to the overuse of farming chemicals and industrialization. Now, this comes as something that a lot of people have suspected for a very long time, but this study now absolutely shows that the process of industrialization, which began under frankly, the capitalist government, the capitalist rotors, is now poisoning 1/5 of all usable land in the country. They say the situation is the most worrying when it comes to abandoned industrial and abandoned mining areas. This study started in 2005 and finished in December 2013. The study covered about 630 square kilometers of land and took around 100,000 samples across China. 70% of the samples were lightly polluted, with pollution levels twice the national standard, and 7% were heavily polluted, with levels more than 5 times the national standard. Most of the land surveyed is on the east coast of China, which is the most industrial part of the country, although the report found that the southwest of the country was particularly badly hit by heavy metal pollution. This report actually corresponds to something that we've seen for some time now, the so-called cancer villages in China, where people are found to have rates of cancer which are astronomically higher than other places in the country where they are located right next to industrial areas. The lack of regulation around pollution has caused entire villages to turn their population into cancer. Now, this is most definitely, given the fact that it is industrial pollution, is highly connected to this and actually confirms that this is the definite source of the cancers that are appearing in these villages. We are, however, lucky to find out that this study was originally declared a state secret and wasn't meant to be published. However, that has been changed and has now been put forth, as I'm obviously speaking about it right now. But it also leaves us a big question. How much information has been left out due to government censorship? Well, we now see what industrialization means to the capitalist rotors, to the rightists in the party. It means just going ahead and doing it and not giving any thought to what the cost is. You can argue that this began somewhat in the 80s, but you cannot ignore the fact that the massive boom has been under the outright capitalist government in the 90s, where they've put through production simply for profits, not for people, where they would have collectively decided on commune level how to do it to avoid situations like this. This is the inevitable consequence of doing things for money, the accumulation of capital for the sake of accumulating capital, and not doing it for human need, where a form of social organization could have prevented things like this. The industrialization process would have taken longer, but it wouldn't have destroyed all these people's lives. The leaking of this report by the capitalist government in China certainly does seem to indicate something. They're aware that there's a problem and that there's been a lot of backlash because of this, because of environmental problems, which is why, they recently just made a change that they're going to focus on green energy, even if it comes at the cost of the country's GDP, for more ecologically sustainable industry, because they do recognize the social upheaval that's going to come about because of this. So at least they do recognize on some level that there's a problem and that they need to start taking care of it. This ecological destruction, just like the extraction of value, just like the rates of exploitation, it's the third world who has to pay for this. We get our cheap commodities, we get our cheap steel, we get all of the things that we have, the cheaper resources, in order to have the first world living standard. It's coming from China. And they, the people of China, not so much the rich, but eventually even the rich too, are paying for our privilege. The ecological destruction carried out on the third world is primarily due to the consumption patterns of first world people and first world nations in general. As we overconsume, as the capitalist system needs overproduction, needs planned obsolescence, this creates a greater and greater creation of pollution. It is our consumption patterns in the first world that are driving this to be so bad. But once again, just like with the super high levels of exploitation, we don't have to do that. Now, we get low levels of exploitation. They get the super exploitation. They now have to pay the super consequences for ecological destruction. And this shows more of the gap that there is between the first world and the third world worker. We get all the benefit of that. We get that winning end of imperialism, even as working class people in the first world. They, on the other hand, are getting all the negative consequences of being a working class and often peasant person being in the third world. This is another first world privilege that goes largely ignored. Yeah, we get our own, environmental destruction, but not on the level that the third world gets. And there's tons of examples we can have. 1/5 of farming land in China now destroyed. Ghana as the digital dumping ground of the world. The lack of, labor regulations, oil being dumped into rivers with no form of protection, whatsoever. It's not us in the first world who have to put up with that. We get the occasional accident from people just not caring enough. Outright deliberate destruction of the environment in the third world that they have to live with, that we don't have to live with, is all because of our position and our consumption patterns in the first world. And that's an absolute truth. Thank you for watching. Please comment and rate the video. If you liked it, hit subscribe or check out some of these other great videos. If you wish, share it on social media. While you're at it, why don't you follow me on Twitter? And if you got time, go on over to the MRN bookstore and check out some of the latest books available.